Let us pray. From our forests and parkland to our prairies and mountains comes the call of our land. From our farmsteads, towns, and cities comes the call of our people that as legislators of this province, we act with responsibility and sensitivity. Lord, grant us the wisdom to meet such challenges. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, there are many distinguished visitors in Alberta this week because of the annual Premiers Conference. And today, seated in your gallery, we have visitors from Ontario, the Honourable Provincial Treasurer of that province, the Honourable Robert Nixon and his wife, Dorothy. I'd like them to stand and receive the warm welcome of our Assembly.
Presenting petitions, reading and receiving petitions, presenting reports by standing and special committees.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Private Bills has had the following bills under consideration and recommends that they be proceeded with. Bill PR1, Alberta Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada Act. Bill PR3, Oxford Trust Company Limited Act. Bill PR5, Alberta Native Business Summit Foundation Act. Bill PR6, Timothy Z. Marshall Bar Admission Act. Bill PR7, the Calgary Research and Development Authority Amendment Act 1986. Bill PR8, City of Edmonton and Northwestern Utilities Limited Agreement Act 1986. And Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Private Bills has further had the following bills under consideration and recommends that they be proceeded with certain amendments. Bill PR2, Northwest Bible College Act. Bill PR4, Canada Olympic Park Property Tax Exemption Act.
Does the Assembly agree with the recommendations of the Standing Committee on Private Bills? Opposed? So ordered.
Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 28, the Appropriation Act. Since, Mr. Speaker, this is a money bill, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor has been informed of the contents of the bill. I recommend the same to the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, this is the appropriation bill which provides for the voting of estimates which we considered up until yesterday at 5:30.
The Honourable Provincial Treasurer has moved first reading of Bill 28, the Appropriation Act 1986. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being the Appropriation Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Mr. Johnston, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Speaker, I am very pleased today to introduce to you, and through you to the members of this Assembly, two gentlemen that are in the members' gallery. They are two gentlemen that are very active in the ethno-cultural affairs of this province, and particularly of southern Alberta. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Mike Brar, who is the president of the Ethnic Canadian Association of Alberta and a member of the Sikh Society of Calgary. Joining Mr. Brar today is Mr. Ed Kaloy, who is an officer of the Calgary Federated Filipino Association. I'd like them to rise and receive the warm welcome of this legislature.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce 9 students from the International Student Center in the constituent Edmonton Strathcona, accompanied by their coordinator, Najib Mirza. If they would rise, please, and if members would give them the customary welcome.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity also to introduce 4 people who are very involved both in the ethnic community and the community at large in Calgary. The 4 being Detlef Lehman, Paul Lael, Tony Kosh, and Gabe Bacchus. They have participated in many activities in the community. I'd like them to rise and receive the warm welcome to this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, 9% long-term credit will primarily benefit the established farmers. Meanwhile, we see the average age of farmers increasing and children who are not able to take over the family farm. During the election, I advocated a program of loan guarantees to support vendor financing of farm transfers. My question is to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate what the government's position is on the concept of vendor lending?
Mr. Speaker, I'm more than happy to respond to the Leader of the New Democratic Party and indicate to him that we are presently assessing vendor financing within the department itself. But as the honourable member is aware, and I'm sure it was pointed out to him when he had the opportunity to meet with the Premier of Manitoba, that this province does more for its agricultural sector than any province in Canada. And to underscore that, as it relates to our beginning farmers, we have that very worthwhile program under the Agricultural Development Corporation, and I can go through a consistent list as to the programs that are available for agricultural sector, but on a per capita basis, no province does more than this province.
Mr. Speaker, we ask a simple question about vendor financing. We hear about everything this government's done the last 100 years.
Pretended that they've done.
Do you know what vendor financing is? My question to this minister, it seems to us that vendor financing wouldn't be that expensive and would increase the chance of families actually owning their own land. My question is, what studies has the government commissioned to look at the stability which would result when the majority of land was not owned by lending institutions?
Right.
Mr. Speaker, it seems when we give a lengthy answer, we're criticized. When we give a short answer, we're criticized. The honourable member is almost impossible to respond to. As I indicated to him, we are presently assessing this, as we are assessing a broad range of programs as it relates to the agricultural sector.
Specifically, Mr. Speaker, I would have thought this government that's for privatization would be very interested in this type of program. But from the minister himself, would the minister be prepared to lobby his colleagues in the Alberta government about bringing in a program of vendor financing?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the honourable member opposite, we believe we should study something before opening our mouth. And we're going to make sure that it does serve a distinct purpose and a useful purpose to our agricultural sector prior to advocating anything.
Mr. Speaker, it seems like the honourable member opens his mouth and then tries to find out studies after. My question is to this minister, would the minister indicate to this Assembly how we can protect the family farm without this sort of financing in the future? Or in other words, are we content to lead towards corporate operations in this province?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member would have been paying attention for the last number of years, he would have seen the number of innovative programs that we have established to protect the family farm. Innovative programs that we're all very proud of and that the family community within the farming sector has been very supportive. And any time the honourable member would like, rather than abuse the time of this chamber, I'm more than happy to list all those worthwhile programs.
Go ahead.
Supplementary question to the provincial treasurer. While these fellows are bobbing, exercising, I'd like to ask a question. To the provincial treasurer, Mr. Speaker, yeah, that's right. You've got to watch to the right. To the provincial treasurer, in terms of Alberta's credit programs that we now have in place, and as well the conference discussion that is going on with regards to free trade, could the minister indicate at this time whether other provinces of Canada are indicating some concern about the present programming of the province of Alberta in terms of its effect on free trade and the discussions that are being carried on with the United States at the present time?
Mr. Speaker, I should say that in discussions with some of the colleagues who are attending the Premier's conference currently, and it is a great opportunity to exchange ideas as to how various governments are reacting to the kinds of problems which their economies are facing, and in fact attempting to react to various sectoral changes which they face. There has not been any major criticism raised about the Alberta program from those provinces which are joining us. Clearly, in the case of Saskatchewan, there's already a financing program in place, and I've been advised by the Premier of that province that he's optimistic, based on the crop reports that he's receiving, that in fact the farmers will do fairly well in terms of volumes, some uncertainty about pricing. But no serious questions have been raised, Mr. Speaker, with respect to our very substantial $2 billion, 9% farm credit program, and many provinces are looking to us as a model and suggesting that they would like to see ways to adapt this program in terms of their own situation.
Speaker, this is to the Minister of Agriculture. I don't mind a long answer as long as it's a good answer, not all the wind here. But Mr. Minister, I am pleased to hear you say that you are now going to push for the family farm. Does that mean that we are now going to meet the often repeated request of the Alberta Liberal Party that the spouse be considered a full partner, and therefore the maximum under the loan program will be moved from $200,000 to $400,000 for a spouse and their husband or wife, whatever the case may be, in applying for a loan?
Mr. Speaker, we on this side have responded to that question on a number of occasions, and we have indicated we've indicated to the honourable member what our terminology is as it relates to a family farm, and we believe it to be very fair.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct a second question to, I guess, the Deputy Premier. Given reports that a majority of members of this Assembly favor a mandatory seatbelt law, would the government now show enough courage to place Bill 211, the Seatbelt Act, on the order paper under government bills and orders?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Premier did say at the beginning of this session that he was considering a free vote on that matter, and I know he's still got the item under active consideration, and certainly because of the bill that's on the order paper, I think we can expect an announcement on that before too long.
Supplementary question. I would wonder when. We've been saying that we're running out of the session, but I'll direct my second question to the Minister of Transportation and Utilities. And previous ministers of transportation have been pushing, specifically the member from Chinook, have led the fight for seatbelt use. My question is, what steps is this minister taking to encourage introduction and adoption of mandatory seatbelt legislation?
Good question, Mr. Speaker. My position is publicly known, I think, all around the province. I am 100% for seatbelts. I am against mandatory seatbelts. And that's a position I, as an MLA, and my constituents, pardon me? I was interrupted, and I just had to hear it, Mr. Speaker. But I think it should be pointed out that I have said on a number of occasions that when the private member's bill, Bill 211, comes forward, I will watch with interest the debate and the direction that will come from that particular motion when it is debated.
Mr. Speaker, it seems like the two honourable ministers are giving us different answers here, because he's talking about having a free vote on it. But my question is, I should ask the minister if he's against dividing lines on the highways too, because it cuts into our freedom. But my question is, has the minister been presented with some sort of information which contradicts all the studies I've seen, which conclude that mandatory, and I use the term mandatory seatbelt laws, actually save lives and also save taxpayers' money?
Mr. Speaker, I've seen a number of studies and a number of pieces of information that relate to statistics, and I believe one of them that has been used is that in the province of Alberta, the percentage is roughly around 28% that do buckle up. I happen to be one of them, and I'm also one of them that watches the solid line when I'm going up a hill, and I even have the occasion to be passed by one of the honourable members on the other side in a little car on a solid line. But I should also point out that there is some merit in some of the statistics, and I have no problem in laying them out there, that it appears that in some cases where legislation is in place, that the percentage of buckling up is as high as 60%. Now, that's higher than the 28, but lower than maybe what they need. But I still believe that I buckle up because as a member who travels back and forth to my constituency 311 miles up and the same distance back, and I only say that because you might get a different figure, the fact that the seat belts are being used by me because it was a matter of just using common logic. And I would hope that many of us, Mr. Speaker, would use that kind of logic when they get into their vehicle.
Supplementary question. In view of the minister's answers about common logic, surely this is what this legislature is supposed to bring out, common logic. Why then is the minister not prepared to push for a free vote on this so common logic can prevail throughout the province?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think there was any inference that I wasn't prepared to push. The Honourable Deputy Premier indicated that the Premier had indicated, give me the opportunity, okay? That that I almost said something, Mr. Speaker.
Keep your tongue in, Boomer.
I should maybe have a drink of water. The Honourable Premier did indicate that he was considering a free vote, and I have not said I was either for that or against that, but I think it's very clear that I will watch with interest the debate that occurs on Bill 211, Private Members Bill 211, relating to seat belts front and back, taxi cabs or otherwise, whatever the case may be, and follow the direction that's given from them.
Thank you. Member for Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Deputy Premier. Can the Deputy Premier give an indication to this legislature if the government would allow Bill 211 to come to a vote? Can the Deputy Premier make that kind of a commitment in this Assembly?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I obviously can't because the Leader of Government, as the Chairman of our caucus, has said that he's giving that matter serious consideration. I'm fascinated by the proposition that we should do this based on common logic. You know, this morning the Queen climbed up 160 steps. And yet every morning I come out of breakfast to the legislative cafeteria and try and get some of these lumps not to take the elevator. Maybe we ought to legislate use of the stairs.
I'm glad that everyone has buckled up on the issue. We will move to the Leader of the Liberal Party, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Recreation and Parks. Although we agree that it's desirable to have sports exchange agreements with other countries and increase contact between nations, does promote understanding and enables countries to share expertise in staging of sporting events. Now, in the long-term evaluation of exchange programs, however, is an integral part of any process. Now, could the minister elaborate, for instance, on the cost of his trip to China, where he negotiated and completed and signed a sport exchange agreement with the provincial government of, here I go, Heilongjiang?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the question would be more appropriately put if it were on the order paper, but I certainly welcome the opportunity to clear any misunderstanding, because if the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, would have read the release properly, he would note that we were hosted by the government of China. I'm still responding, if I may, Mr. Speaker. I believe I have the floor. The total cost I haven't ascertained because all items are not in, but I would estimate my expense to be under $500 for the complete 12 to 14-day trip. I don't think that's a great expense.
With regard to the first part of the question, it's indeed correct. It's a matter for the order paper. We're dealing with the expenses of a trip. But nevertheless, the minister has been recognized with his ability to be able to respond to the second part of the first question. Could we go to the first supplementary, please?
The first supplementary, Mr. Speaker, then is, I couldn't gather from the fact he said it was hosted and then he was paying money, although I know that's often called a Dutch treat, I guess. But could he tell the Assembly how many people accompanied him and if he intends to have a return party come back to Edmonton?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do believe it should be put on the order paper, and I'd certainly like to once again clarify the misunderstanding that about the reciprocal trade agreement and our exchange agreement, in particular the fact that we were being hosted because I think it was an ideal opportunity to reciprocate because the government of China had recently attended functions in the province of Alberta, and we were asked to reciprocate as well. There will be ongoing exchange agreements, I'm sure, in years to come. I'm hopeful of that, and this government is going to work and encourage that. As far as the number of people in attendance, my executive assistant attended, as well as one senior department official.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, I hope it's not getting him to be too defensive, but does he have a planned budget of exchange to exchange athletes between China and Alberta?
Well, I'm glad that Mr. Speaker, the member would recognize the whole purpose, because that is the purpose of it. Yes, there's budgetary fundings. It's in there in black and white, and I believe if I go by memory, it's some $255,000 program for this year's exchange agreements.
Supplemental to the minister, could he possibly explain to the House why $250,000 is budgeted to exchange athletes with China and why China's picked over any other country in Southeast Asia?
Well, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister, the second part of the question is in order. The first is appropriately for estimates, but it's a matter of responding with respect to the second part about this choice of China.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's ongoing that this government would try and work with all other governments wherever possible. We have sports agreements with many others, including Korea and others, and I would welcome that the honourable member put the question on the order paper.
So, member for supplementary information.
Supplement the response by my colleague, the Minister of Recreation and Parks. Alberta has worked very hard to develop trading relationships with the people of Southeast Asia, and particularly with the People's Republic of China. The efforts in that regard began with the twinning of the province of Alberta with the province of Heilongjiang in China. Last year, our trade with China grew substantially over previous years, and this increase in trading opportunities for the business community in Alberta has resulted from exchanges such as the sports exchange and the twinning and the efforts of Alberta business community to enhance the trade opportunities. These sorts of exchanges, Mr. Speaker, are valuable in enhancing Alberta's exports and improving job opportunities for Albertans.
Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary is to the Minister of Recreation and Parks regarding the hosting of athletes and officials during the 1988 Winter Olympics. What direction is the Minister giving to their representatives on OCO to meet with members of Calgary's multicultural community to examine ways in which they could participate in hosting athletes and officials that will be participating in the 1988 Winter Olympics?
Member, the chair is prepared to recognize that as a separate question if time permits in question period. Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the provincial treasurer, and it's relative to the $750 million small business term assistance loan. Could the provincial treasurer indicate what target date is established now for announcement of that program? In July, the minister indicated that mid-August was a possibility.
Mr. Speaker, we had hoped to be able to launch the program mid to third week in August. It appears now, as a result of further negotiations that the provincial treasurer and I are involved with the financial institutions, that it would probably be closer to the latter part of August or early September.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate whether there is a categorization being put in place relative to small business, or will it be open to all small businesses and the judgment as to who qualifies and doesn't will be that of the various banking institutions?
Mr. Speaker, there will be criteria, and some of them are already public as a result of the announcement by the government. Basically, the program is for small business. It's for small businesses that derive their income from active business sources as opposed to passive business sources. The businesses must have fewer than 100 employees. The businesses must not have gross sales greater than $5 million or gross profits that are in excess of $1 million. So there are additional criteria that will be made public soon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, in terms of the mix of existing loans and new loans, would the possible mix or the indications at the present time that the mix will be a 75-25, similar to the agricultural 9% program that's presently in place?
Mr. Speaker, the total program is, as well, everyone is well aware, is $750 million. And we expect that there'll be a take-up among existing businesses as well as the opportunity for new businesses to take advantage of the program. The government is not placing a restriction by way of a percentage on new versus old, because we believe that the way the program is designed, that there will be a balance in terms of that take-up.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary, in terms of stacking, we had questions earlier with regards to the agricultural 9% program that stacking was not allowed relative to ADC programs. Will that same principle apply relative to AOC programs and other programs of government?
One of the provisions of the program will be that a small business that qualifies under the criteria of the program and presently has a loan with Alberta Opportunity Company, Alberta Opportunity Company in that case would provide that company with a loan that has provisions that are identical to the Small Business Term Assistance Program.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, being that the lending institutions are behind are going to operate small business loans, will they be asking for 100% collateral just as they do with the farm loans?
Mr. Speaker, the criteria that in terms of how the banks will function varies depending on the type of small business and the kind of security. And our guarantees, the provincial government guarantees, which are very important on the program in terms of making this program accessible to a wide range of small businesses, enhances the opportunity for a small business to obtain fixed-term 9% financing over 10 years. The amount of security that is required varies depending upon the type of loan that is being requested.
Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a supplementary to the Minister, will there be any special criteria or regulations which would specifically encourage diversification into new economic sectors or new initiatives by small business in Alberta under this program?
Mr. Speaker, as we developed the program and worked at presenting it to our caucus colleagues and approving it, we considered a number of options, such as limiting the program in terms of geography, or limiting it by way of sector, or limiting it new versus old, but rejected that instead developed a program that has program guidelines that provide access to a wide variety of entrepreneurs and small businessmen, whether it's the ma and pa business or the small manufacturer. And we felt that we should, as a government, minimize government interference in terms of the take-up of the program, but allow the marketplace to respond to the program.
Member for Calgary North Hill, followed by the member for Edmonton Belmont.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Energy, and it arises by virtue of the Minister's meeting on Thursday last with his federal counterpart. Did the Minister receive any assurances from Mr. Mass for the immediate removal of PGRT?
Mr. Speaker, I believe the honourable member from North Hill was referring to a meeting I will be having with the honourable federal minister, Mr. Mass, this Thursday. At the meeting, I expect to discuss a number of issues with the federal minister. He's coming to Calgary. He's coming to Alberta for the purpose of speaking to the Chamber of Commerce, and my expectation would be the announcement of the removal of PGRT. However, even with that expectation, we do have a number of things to discuss in view of the recent, in view of the Premier's Conference, where we had unanimous agreement from all the premiers in this country that we have in our oil and gas sector a national problem that needs a national solution. And this received unanimous agreement, and I think that was tremendous. And so we have to force home the point to the federal government that we have to start now in dealing with this national problem.
Supplementary. Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
In his response to the question from the member for Calgary North Hill, the minister said that he had other things to discuss besides the removal of the PGRT, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the minister could tell us what those things are.
Not at this time, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary. Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary to the Minister of Energy, in discussing with the removal of the PGRT, is the minister going to come up with, at the same time, any policy for the use of the money that will then be left in Alberta by the PGRT being cancelled?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not anticipating that we'll have any discussions on PGRT. Hopefully it'll be gone. And there'll be, we've indicated in the past that it was a tax that is discriminatory, unfair on our industry in this province. And we had agreed in the Western Accord that it be phased out over a period of time. The industry picture has changed. We want it removed right away. Once the PGRT is gone, we do not expect that the federal government will then say, our job is done. It will not solve the national problem that we have. It will be a removal of a symbolic situation that is unfair to the province of Alberta. Then we can get on with discussing solutions to the problem that we have.
Member for Little Bow.
Supplementary question to the minister. It wasn't clear whether a meeting had been established, but could the minister confirm from his remarks at the moment that already notification has come from Ottawa that the PGRT will be terminated as of next Thursday's call of the minister in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any advanced knowledge of what the Honourable Federal Minister is going to be announcing with the Chamber of Commerce or what he'll be discussing. I would only assume that given the current situation that we have in the oil and gas sector, that that would be a logical thing to expect.
Member for Edmonton Belmont, followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are directed to the Minister of Labour. Last week, during my questions to the Minister, he stated that the rides at West Edmonton Mall were closed after the Mindbender accident and then subsequently reopened after it was felt that they had been adequately inspected. Can the Minister advise the House if this inspection of all the rides included the submarines?
Mr. Speaker, I was referring to the rides in what is commonly called Fantasyland and not in the water park, which is another part of the establishment.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Given that the government is allowing 555 to do their own investigation and are awaiting the results of that investigation before determining a plan of action, is it now government policy to allow companies to conduct their own internal investigations when an industrial mishap occurs, which includes recommendations for corrective actions?
It may be under the unusual circumstances that this is the only fleet of submarines in the province.
Well, in that there's a discrepancy between the version of the events between 555 and the Department of Labor with regard to the accident. Will the minister be tabling both reports in the House for review so that we might determine why those discrepancies exist?
Mr. Speaker, we will undoubtedly be reviewing the report on the incident in the submarine very thoroughly within the department, and that will be done prior to any further operation of the submarines. Whether the report will be made public or not, I am not yet sure.
It becomes a question of whose report, the corporations or the government's. My final supplementary, in that the terms of reference for the Mindbender inquiry permits a rather wide-ranging look at amusement regulations, is the minister able to assure us that he has requested the inquiry committee to look at the submarine accident as well?
In relation to specific inquiries, the committee was requested to look at the accident to the roller coaster and to also look at regulations and the enforcement of regulations and inspections of similar types of equipment. It was not specific in those cases, it was general, and I presume that is the type of report I will get from Mr. Mackenzie and Dr. Kulak. If in the course of their inquiry they indicate any indication for investigating a specific occurrence of the flooding of the submarine, I would certainly extend their jurisdiction to cover that incident, but I'll leave it in the first instance up to the commissioners.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by the member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Recent reports indicate that certain national banks are becoming increasingly cautious about investing their money, their assets in Alberta, putting more strain on an already strained area of our economy. The government's response to improving and strengthening our regional financial industry has been to emphasize equity market creation, to emphasize the brokerage industry with programs such as the Alberta Stock Savings Plan, the Small Business Equity Corporation Program, and VENCAP, all of which are good ideas if implemented properly. While these are in fact good ideas, could the minister please indicate how these kinds of ideas assist traditional forms of financial enterprise in this province and such institutions as Northwest Trust and Heritage Trust and CCB in the past, when in fact they probably compete with them?
Mr. Speaker, I'd sure appreciate the question again so I can reduce it to simple terms. It's difficult for me today to understand that preamble.
Well, it's not the first time it's been difficult for you to understand a question. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker...
Order, please. With due respect to the honourable member for Edmonton Meadowlark, there were indeed a number of convoluted strands woven together in the web of the question. Perhaps a quick question would be helpful, and then the other aspects could be brought out in your succinct supplementaries.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes when we get into a new area of policy that people don't understand, it seems difficult. And in fact, that begs the very question about other forms of industry in this province other than energy and agriculture. My question is that the response to problems in our financial industry has been strictly to emphasize the equity market and the brokerage side of our financial industry. What do SPECs, what does VENCAP, and what do Alberta Stock Savings programs do to assist traditional trust company kinds of investment corporations? What are you doing to help them?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the member enumerated the vast number of programs which this government has undertaken in the past 2 years to strengthen and to put in place a secure financial infrastructure in this province, directed at achieving new jobs, protecting jobs, and generating new investment for this province, the success of which has been demonstrated time and time again. I really appreciate the opportunity for the member to underscore the important initiatives taken by this government. Once you start to muster the equity markets, once you start to bring into focus new equity within the private sector, traditional forms of capital will flow to the private sector. And that essentially is what's happening right now. Once the equity is strengthened, other kinds of funding obviously flow to the private sector from banks, from other sources, and that, of course, is taking place in this province. And in conversations recently with two of the senior leaders of the banking institution, they have reported to me that, in fact, in the majority of the service industry in this province, their banking operations have been very successful. They're advancing more loans than ever. And, in fact, the net flow of capital from across Canada into Alberta is still in our favor. More money is coming to Alberta than, in fact, is going to deposits elsewhere. And so there is an opportunity here, Mr. Speaker, for us to outline very fully that because of the equity building programs, because of the Alberta Opportunity Corporation, because of Ag Development Corporation, which is an agricultural service and business sector, in fact, it is
The Chair thanks both honourable members for demonstrating the difficulty of long questions then requiring long answers. Supplementary question.
It's interesting to see that the Elaine McCoy School of Answering is catching on. What steps is the Treasurer taking to allow Alberta trust companies to diversify their investment portfolios so they're not so completely dependent upon a single asset class, mortgages, which seem to turn into owned real estate? Could you please elaborate on those kinds of initiatives?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd be glad to elaborate, but I know you're going to cut me off because, of course, this is nothing but begging debate. If the member wants to get involved in some kind of discussion with respect to the financial future of this province and the ways in which this government has responded beyond any other province in this country, then he should put it in the order paper. We'll all have a chance to get at it. But otherwise, I know you're going to cut me off because it's been so long and so extensive and so important and so dramatic. So dramatic, Mr. Speaker, that if I was to go on all day, we could spend 3 hours talking about it.
Well, an industry of this importance might require 3 hours. What is the Treasurer doing about getting the international banking privilege for Alberta, because it's been accorded by the federal government to BC and to Quebec, and it could be very helpful to our financial industry here in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, Alberta is one of the leading financial centres in Canada. It is a leading international financial centre of Canada. And even though Mr. Wilson in his last budget spoke about 2 financial centres in Vancouver and Winnipeg, or Vancouver and Toronto, in fact, those have not taken place, and we have protested seriously that that sort of special treatment should be given to those 2 cities. And we have continued to harp on that point, and we know that the financial institutions who have moved their head offices to Calgary and Edmonton follow the need for the financial flow of capital to this province, and they have already made that major commitment. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do whatever we can in a variety of ways in terms of strengthening the private sector, bringing financial institutions to this province, and using our forces to ensure that no city gets a special treatment, whether by budget or by government policy, and to ensure that Calgary and Edmonton, which have one of the most amazing centres for financial interaction worldwide and within Canada, maintain that strength.
Final supplementary.
Given the importance of the brokerage industry to creative brokerage policy to an integrated financial industry strategy for Alberta, could the
Chair rises again with great reluctance, but a supplementary question is a question, not a statement, or 2 statements, or 3 statements, plus a question. May we please have the question?
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Can the Treasurer please tell the House what concrete measures he has taken to ensure that there is interdepartmental cooperation with his department and the Department of Consumer and Corporate Affairs to bring brokerage policy into an integrated financial industry strategy?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I have talked before about the way in which the province of Alberta is developing a policy dealing with the so-called 4 pillars of the financial sector, not only in Canada but in Alberta. And we have made a number of recommendations to a variety of groups talking about the normal banking institutions, about the underwriting of stock, about the underwriting of risks in terms of insurance, and with respect to the investment industry itself. And on those, the trust companies themselves. And in those 4 areas, Mr. Speaker, we have already, within our own policy limitations, outlined clearly through a variety of papers and a variety of strategies and public statements and policies, programs, and funding arrangements to ensure that those 4 sectors are in fact maintained on this province. Concurrently, Mr. Speaker, all departments and all governments who have a contact with financial institutions have a comprehensive policy. To some extent, that policy was outlined in the financial infrastructure paper, which was released last year by the then Premier Lougheed, which in fact was one of the first papers ever done in Canada to outline and to detail its own policy with respect to the financial systems in this province. Currently, we are considering and reacting to the recommendations, the so-called Green Paper recommendations put out by Barbara McDougall, which in essence deal with the 4 outlines that I talked about. But moreover, we are dealing here with a variety of programs, both to supplement the private sector, to encourage, by way of attitude, the financial institutions to locate here, but moreover attracting wherever possible, providing an environment for the private sector, the financial private sector, to operate profitably here in this province. They know it's successful, and they will continue to be in this province above all other provinces.
Honourable members, in this case, the member for Edmonton Meadowlark and also the member for Westlock Sturgeon. In the course of that answer, I believe there were at least 2, if not 3, interruptions by both members. And again, the Chair would once again respectfully remind the members, Standing Order 13, subsection 4B, when a member is speaking, no person shall interrupt that member except to raise a point of order. Chair recognizes the member for Edmonton Glen Kingsway, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Treasurer is, would the Treasurer, in building his next budget, consider some demand-side economic initiatives rather than relying almost solely on supply-side economic theory, which is what you've just been discussing?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm tempted to recite the pros and cons of supply-side economics versus demand-side economics, but again, Mr. Speaker, I know that's limited to grade 10 students where this gentleman has come from, and maybe he should review his own economic books instead of wasting our time here.
Member. Member for Edmonton Glengarry, followed by the member for Calgary-McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will attempt to be brief, as I'm sure will be the Minister of Environment. It's come to my attention. It has come to my attention that representatives of Bradbury Industries have met with officials of the Environment Department. Also, that Bradbury Industries is investigating the purchase of land near the Scottsford plant near Fort Saskatchewan, and they have said they hope for a quick okay on their pentachlorophenol plant so that they can be operational by spring. Can the Minister briefly outline the present state of negotiations with Bradbury Industries?
Mr. Speaker, there are no negotiations underway.
Their consultant is not aware that his meetings weren't negotiations, I guess. Will the Minister guarantee before this or any similar operation to produce pentachlorophenol in Alberta that there will be a study done into PCP production which will include a thorough investigation of Sweden's reasons for banning both production and use of the chemical?
Mr. Speaker, the responses that I'll give today are the same as I gave several weeks ago. There has been no application made by Bradbury Chemicals to Alberta Environment. No application other than just a cursory overview or contacts with certain officials in the department. And until a formal statement or request or something is filed with the government with respect to this, it seems a bit premature to set in place a whole series of mechanisms to review it. I have myself undertaken a personal review of certain situations existing with respect to the chemical involved, but there's been no application from Bradbury Chemicals.
Thank you, but there have been discussions and they have announced when they plan to go ahead. Will the Minister guarantee that before such a plant goes ahead there will be a complete environmental impact assessment done and public hearings in the concerned area.
Mr. Speaker, Bradbury Chemicals can announce anything it chooses to announce. It can't go ahead unless certain things are in place. And several weeks ago, the member from, I believe it was West Loch Sturgeon, asked the same question that's being asked today, and I indicated that there were several steps that had to be taken. First of all, should any firm wish to locate with any particular municipality in the province of Alberta, it must first of all receive a development permit from that particular municipality. And in terms of an application for a development permit, there is a mechanism that will allow a public hearing to go along with that particular item. The second statement undoubtedly is that the firm in question, or any firm in particular, would have to get a license or approval from Alberta Environment. We have had no application whatsoever brought to our attention with respect to that matter. And thirdly, as I repeated several weeks ago, there is the option that would permit the Minister of the Environment to call for an environmental impact assessment.
I guess the public hopes he will. Can the minister reassure the residents of Fort Saskatchewan that it is not his plan that they should be presented with a fait accompli between sessions of the legislature after these negotiations go ahead?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the residents of Fort Saskatchewan would know before the Minister of the Environment would know. Nothing would come to the Minister of the Environment unless, first of all, the residents of the city of Fort Saskatchewan were to, number one, receive a development application, and two, that municipal council would give their approval to such development application. After that, should the firm in question or any other firm wish to make an application to Alberta Environment for a license, we would deal with it. But the citizens who are resident in Fort Saskatchewan would be aware of the day-to-day operation well before, in fact, the Minister of the Environment would be.
Time for question period has expired. The Minister of the Environment wishes to answer questions as raised by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark on Friday last.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday last, the member from Edmonton Meadowlark raised a series of questions with the Premier in the absence of myself. It's my understanding that at the conclusion of the question period, a document was filed on my behalf by the Minister of Transportation and Utilities. It listed 16 pages of text with respect to questions that the member from Meadowlark had asked me during the estimates of Alberta Environment. And in reviewing the questions that were raised on Friday last, I believe that the answers were included in that document, which would cover all of the questions that were raised on Friday last.
Just for the public record, I wonder if the minister could please indicate to us forget it, my question. If I could, I have forgotten he has completely baffled me once again. Excuse me.
The answer is yes.
The honourable member for Edmonton Meadowlark has the sympathy of the entire House as well as the galleries, because it's something that has thrown fear into the hearts of all of us from time to time. We would stand up and have just that happen. So you're just